Ranjay. Welcome to Minds Worth Meeting. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Whitney. Pleasure to be here with you today.
So, we want to just dive right in and talk about your book, Deep Purpose: The Heart and Soul of High Performance Companies. It's received accolade after accolade, and we're curious as to why you think it's resonated so much in leadership circles and with managers.
So, thank you for those kind words. If you told me 5 years ago that I was going to write a book about purpose, I would have said you're crazy. Uh, this was not a topic I was going to write about. I thought of purpose as mission statements. I thought of them as platitudes, kind of posturing, uh, that kind of stuff, right? So, in my mind, it was just kind of like purpose posturing, a lot of it. I mean, I didn't really understand what it meant. I understood also that there's individual purpose. I mean, all of us in life are trying to imagine what is my purpose in life. But for a company, it was really turning into some kind of mission statement. And what I discovered was that actually there's some companies, not a lot, who, that's why the book is called Deep Purpose, who go really deep with their purpose. And it actually unlocks performance, financial performance. They perform better on all metrics. They're more innovative. They're more creative in general. They're growing faster. Um, and it was driven by an unlock in the company that somehow there's this purpose thing that unlocks potentiality in organizations. So I was like, okay, that sounds intriguing. But that was a hypothesis. And I interviewed some people. I had interviewed like one of the first people I interviewed was Satya Nadella at Microsoft. And Satya was like, hey, Ranjay, to really unlock Microsoft, we needed a new strategy. We needed a new organization, org chart and organization, and we needed a new culture. And I'm thinking, textbook, my kind of guy. You want to fix a business, fix the what, strategy, fix the how, the organization and the culture, the what and the how. He said, no, Ranjay, but you missed something. There was another piece of the puzzle we had to do with the why question, purpose. And I'm like, hey, business is about what are you going to do? How are you going to do it? The why is academic, kind of like, it's out there. And he was like, no, Ranjay, you don't get it. Without the why, we really couldn't have done the what or the how.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to really, but he said to ask the why question, you have to really ask what business do we want to be in? How do we want to make money? How do we want to treat our employees? How do we want to treat the planet or the community where we operate? Whatever, and our shareholders. So it's kind of an orienting framework to think about your place in the world and what is that place and what do you want. And then business, we all think about, we talk about positioning statements, strategy statements. So I think for me, the learning was I had to understand that purpose is not a mission statement.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fundamental set of principles that drive your business to greater success. And
And
only, sadly, only a few companies do it.
is a big part of that not only what you want for the company now, but what you want to leave behind?
So, Justin, that's a great question. It's not just about legacy. Legacy is part of purpose,
Mm-hmm.
and some people do a backward process. They start with a legacy, and then they say, okay, if that's my legacy, what's my purpose?
Right.
So it's a good way to kind of get back into purpose. But I think purpose is a larger statement of intention of why am I here. Now, we're not just here to leave a legacy, right? It's not just like it's all about my legacy and everything else is irrelevant. So, but legacy is a good way to work your way back into it. But I think purpose is about intention. It's about saying, here's why I am here, and me individually, but then my organization collectively.
Right.
Why are we here? Like, what's the problem we want to solve for the world? How do we want to, how are we going to solve it? And how are we going to make money doing it also? We have to make it profitably because we're a business, not a nonprofit. So I got to figure that piece out of it as well. So purpose is like an excuse, a forcing mechanism that kind of gets you to think about very deep questions that you don't otherwise think about.
Okay. And do you see more companies prioritizing purpose these days?
Yes. I think it's, Well, that's a self-serving answer. It's not because they read my book. Maybe I'm just riding a wave that's happening anyway. But it's an interesting question, and I'll just kind of, if I may say, is that first of all, 85% of Fortune 500 companies put a purpose statement on their website.
Hmm.
Okay, so boom, but that's not purpose. That's not deep purpose, at least, right? So you put it out there and you say, "Oh yeah, that's my purpose." So you may, if that's your criteria, then yes, almost everybody has one out there.
Right.
But I think if you're really talking about lived purpose or deep purpose, I think you have a smaller fraction, but it's no longer limited to the handful of same suspects. 10 years ago, if you were to ask anybody purpose, they would have said, "Oh, yeah, Ben and Jerry's, Patagonia, Whole Foods,
Right.
and another one or two companies here and there. That's it." Right? I think the idea has gone more mainstream now. Now you've got big four accounting firms talking about it. You got consulting firms talking about it. You have financial firms talking about it. You have manufacturing companies talking about it. You have small companies and large companies. So these ideas, I think, in fact, I wrote one study where I looked at small companies and I published it in the Harvard Business Review. It's called From Big Ideas to Grand Ideas.
Hmm.
That there are a lot of small companies where they're not like only about some big idea. They also have a grand ideal of what problems they want to solve in the world.
Right.
And that animates and energizes their employees, their investors, their customers, and even where they operate. So yeah, I think it's definitely now much bigger than it was even a decade ago.
And Ranjay, would you say that the deeper aspect of identifying a company's purpose also penetrates to the employees rather than, as you said, just a statement on the website? It seems like it's something that each employee also needs to understand and incorporate into their daily work.
So Whitney, you asked the toughest nut in the book that I had to crack. And I have a whole section in the book called Making Purpose Personal. Because I discovered that, I was talking to CEOs of companies and they're like, they've drunk the Kool-Aid, they want to do this. Some of them, not all of them, some of them, they kind of got it. Their senior leadership had an offsite. They came together and they held hands and they said, voila, we have a purpose statement, we're done.
Right.
Off to the races we go, right? But I think the hardest part is what you just said. How do you get people to buy in? In
Hmm.
fact, that's one area where I did do some work. I have a section on metrics and KPIs and how do you measure and reward people. I have a section on how do you hire people. I have a section on how do you put in place an org structure as well as that enables these things. But I still didn't get to it because purpose is both rational and emotional.
Hmm.
You can't lecture a purpose only. You can't just send an email out saying, "Here's our new purpose statement, memorize it." So how do you? And I talk about this in the book actually. First of all, leaders have to think both like what I call poets and plumbers. A
Hmm.
plumber thinks rationally, a poet thinks magically. And you're trying to engage people both rationally and magically as well, right? Emotionally, if I may. And so how do you do that as a leader becomes really, really hard. What is the imagery you have to use, the storytelling you have to do,
Mm.
the compelling case you have to make to and make it personal to help them feel connected to whatever you're talking about. I mean, those are really, really hard things. And I think that was one of the hardest things. I think some companies did something radical experiment. There was a few out there who actually had every employee or most of them go through personal life purpose training exercise. And I'm like, why are you doing that? I mean, that's none of your business, by the way.
Right.
Why are you getting employees to talk about their life purpose, even to themselves? It's not publicly shared. And one of them explained to me very nicely. He said, "Look, it's really hard to get someone to think about company purpose when they haven't even thought about their own purpose."
Mm.
Hmm.
And the idea is you want to connect this company purpose to what their own life purpose is in some ways. And that's what this becomes. And if you like, I can tell you, I remember the story my mother always told me that never strive for work life balance.
Okay.
It's a horrible phrase, she said, because it puts work in opposition to life. You can get work leisure balance, work
Hmm.
family balance, but to say that I'm trying to get work life means that work is not life, meaning are you dead at work? I mean, it's like, oh, I'm only living after work hours.
Right.
So what are you doing the rest of the time? And so how do you make these things? People are looking for more coherence in their lives. And how do we find that coherence and purpose? So some companies were doing this personal life purpose exercises. At Microsoft, in fact, the head of HR, Kathleen Hogan, said to me, "You don't." They tell their employees, "You don't really work for Microsoft until Microsoft works for you." So how do we make that real? How do you
Right.
make it personal? How do you make it, impactful?
If I recall, your mother was a fashion entrepreneur and apparel entrepreneur. Um, as far as the work life balance, how did she kind of on a practical level bring that work life balance issue? How does she deal with that?
So, let's go back to the idea of what is purpose
Mm-hmm.
or personal purpose. And I'm going to quote, paraphrase, not quote exactly, Stanford psychologist William Damon, who defines personal purpose as a stable and generalized intention to accomplish something that is meaningful to the self and of consequence to the world beyond the self. Most important word is and. We want to do things that are meaningful to us. We are. And also, of most of us, not all of us, have a deep down residual desire to do something bigger than ourselves, right? Impact wise. It doesn't have to be only financially. So, I just, my mother was a school teacher. She taught at the American school in New Delhi. And in the 60s, she was a really good teacher. And the school sponsored and sent her for a course to Vanderbilt University in the United States. And the course was for school teachers. So they met every summer for 5 summers. And at the end of it, they got a master's degree. And that they would meet in Europe as a central location in Athens, Greece, where the faculty would fly in and spend 3 months there. So she went for this course in Athens, Greece, and her master's thesis in anthropology was on tribal Indian women who were really dirt poor, but still would find the space and time to hand print their own fabric that they wore on their garments. And these were beautiful vegetable dyes. They had no money to buy dyes. They would take vegetables and use the color, and it was a hand me down tradition. And so she was so fascinated. She wrote a thesis on this. She bought some of these fabrics for herself. And at the American school, she was very proud to show these Americans that I'm Indian and India's poor because India was very poor, still is. Poverty all around you, but we're a very advanced ancient civilization with beautiful things. And here's what I'm wearing. So all her friends would want to buy her designs from her, clothes from her. When she would go to Athens, they would want to. So in 1972, she has a crazy idea. She goes to Paris with 2 suitcases of her samples and convinces 3 top fashion houses to buy her designs. And there starts a business that explodes. But her idea is never to make money per se. Her idea, money was a byproduct. The idea was to show the Western world that India is an advanced civilization and also to help these women and villagers start livelihoods and, of course, for herself too. She was part of the story. She wanted to be successful too. So, but it's all together, right? And this thing explodes. She works crazy hours. And I'm telling her one day, and I'm a teenager, and she has been working crazy hours in her factories. And I tell her, Mom, you need work life balance. This is crazy. And that's when she told me that, son, what a horrible phrase. She said, I don't know why you're feeling like I'm working too hard. I'm not. I don't even know what you mean by I'm working. I don't feel I'm working. And I don't know. I feel lucky that I'm making money doing something that I really love to do anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the
Right.
problem? So I think that was my early inkling into how people try to create meaning. And even Satya, back to Satya and others I've interviewed, I interviewed like CEOs from all over the world who all talked about the idea that work needs to be infused with meaning.
Hmm.
That, what we do should feel to us like what I'm doing matters. And when we do that, great things materialize.
And what's that old saying? If you love what you do, you never work a day in your life.
Exactly. And I think so, but I want to unpack love what you do,
Okay.
because I think actually that phrase is a little misleading, because you know I think the idea is finding purpose in what we do, right? Because love kind of creates attachment, has a entertainment value. Oh, I don't love what I do, but if what you do is meaningful to you, it doesn't matter. You may not love it. I mean, Paul Farmer, who ran, healthcare organizations till he passed away in Haiti, I don't know, maybe he loved what he did, but he sure had a lot of purpose in what he did also. He was intentionally committed. So maybe there's love. My mother loved what she did. So, but I think behind the loving, there's a deeper idea, I think, of having this sense of intention and purpose, and that I matter. What I'm doing is making a difference in the world.
I love that.
So it's impossible to talk about business without mentioning artificial intelligence these days. Over the last year and a half, generative AI has completely consumed our lives, how we work, how we create, etc. Uh, what is it, as a corporate strategy and change management expert, what is the most important thing for leaders to really understand about AI and how it's impacting the business world?
So, full disclosure, my undergraduate degree, I have two degrees in economics and computer science. And my master's thesis at MIT was on building an AI system. I wrote two theses. One of them was on building an AI system for a marketing professor. This is 1987. Okay, we didn't call it AI, we called it expert systems back then.
Okay.
And it was a very simple system, and it was a decision making heuristic system to help codify knowledge of how couponing should be done in a consumer packaged goods company. So, yeah, AI is going to be transformational. Yeah, we know that, right? And a lot of businesses, we know from my late colleague, Clay Christensen, that companies and individuals struggle with disruptive change. They resist it, they fight it, they deny it. So, I think all those things are important. We got to kind of figure that out, right? We got to figure out how we're going to deal with any kind of disruptive change. And if you haven't read Innovator's Dilemma, go read it, right? Clay wrote that book decades ago, and I think it's still as true today as it was before. So the first thing is kind of understanding. I think we need to get our heads around what it is and what it is not.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is where this idea of getting beyond the hype becomes so important, because
Mm.
I think we all think it's going to be transformational, but we don't know exactly how. And so it's like, oh, doom and gloom, it's going to take over the world, the planet, humanity. We've all seen Terminator and we're scared like the daylights out of us. I think um, we need to understand exactly first how AI works. What is ChatGPT? What is generative AI? What are large language models? How do we train them up so they can do what we want them to do, what they can't do? And I always go back to one thing that I'm sure there's a lot of change going to happen, and I'm in the midst of this right now. I'm looking at industries and companies that are being transformed or are transforming themselves proactively
Right.
around AI tools, like marketing agencies, how they generate content, how they engage with their clients, how they engage with social media outlets. The whole thing is getting automated and changing. Content generation becomes automated. So there is going to be change around out there, and what they do is going to be different. But I do believe there's two pieces that human beings can play a role. One is, you may have artificial intelligence, but there will always be room for some amount of human intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And even if there isn't, and even if the machine makes better decisions than us, there are so many jobs where the human being validator is almost like a notary. You may be a notary public, you got to just sign the darn thing. There's going to be need for human intelligence on mission critical tasks.
Mhm.
You're not going to launch nuclear missiles on a AI generated automated system, right? You're not going to bet the company on some things like that, or you're not going to accept a medical diagnosis, which is a life and death treatment issue of should I have surgery or not, on an automated system. You're going to you may, for at least it'll be suggestive to you, right? So there's always going to be room for human intelligence as a support, a validator, complementer to that artificial intelligence. But
So
I think
my
there's another piece of the puzzle, which is I've learned, even at a human level, intelligence doesn't equal wisdom,
Right.
right? You may make the rational, optimized decision based on the data and facts you have. It may not be the wise decision. And I think there is something inside some of us who are capable of making wise decisions. So I'm hopeful. Now back to the more technical, tactical. I think I'm now working on a taxonomy of the different dimensions of the business that are going to be impacted by AI. How is it going to impact customer-facing activities, supplier-facing activities, business transformation activities? There's going to be enterprise-wide kind of transformations, and how do we need to think about that, engage with that, relate to that? I mean, being a computer scientist helps a little bit. So I'm excited about this project. Finally, my ideas are and my training all kind of intersect in some
Yeah,
place.
it sounds like it's coming full circle for you.
That it is.
during this process, during the research, is there anything that kind of surprised you that you didn't expect to see either at this point or at all?
Well, there's several things. First of all, AI is moving much faster than anybody expected it to, right? So the pace at which models are learning and improving is spectacular. Computational capacity is growing really fast as well, to the point where we don't have enough energy, right? So we're like, okay, oh my god. So you see what's going on here. There's a lot of pace of change, computationally as well. But if you look at companies' adoption and use of AI as tools, uh, I think a lot of people are confused,
Yep.
or if they're not confused, they're waiting on the sidelines to see what others are going to do, right? And some are even scared. So you got confusion, you got fear, you got kind of like wait and see attitudes. So you have a lot of kind of mixed messaging right now. If I gave a talk recently to an industry association of CEOs. They're going to be a big impact of AI in this sector. I asked them, I said, tell me, how many of you believe that AI is going to have a massive impact on your business in the next 12 to 18 months? I was very deliberate about that. All of them raised that. I then said, how many of you have an AI focused task force in your organization kind of trying to figure it out? They all raised their hand. I said, how many of you figured it out? Like what you're going to do? No hands went up.
Hmm.
So I'm like, okay, so you've delegated it to committee. Now committee's gonna go figure it out, and hopefully they'll come to some consensus. And by the time they come to consensus, it'll be like 18 months later. So, I think we have some ways to go. And I think it'd be helpful for all of us, myself included, to get some clarifying models on what exactly is the potentiality behind AI and its impact on enterprises. I think that's the holy grail right now,
Right.
is to give people shine some light into this darkness.
Ranjay, for the organizations that are waiting to see what's going to happen with it, if it's just a passing fad, or they're just too scared to dive in, what would you say to them?
A couple of things. First of all, I think it's important to understand there's risk and uncertainty. Risk is when you know the distribution of outcomes and you can put some probability on the distribution of outcomes. 10% chance of this, 20% chance of this, 70% chance of this, and you're kind of like playing the odds,
Mm-hmm.
right? Uncertainty is where you don't even know the distribution of outcomes. We're kind of not in a risk place. You can do some risk management around AI. I'm granted, but you got to take a leap of faith. There's gonna have to be some leap of faith because the uncertainty is not exactly fully surmountable, and you can't turn it into risk yet. The second thing we need to understand is that in times of uncertainty, the human condition, we are wired as human beings to wait. It's also called status quo bias,
Right.
and it's based on the fundamental implicit bias in most of us that in times of uncertainty, doing nothing is safer than doing something wrong. It's default. I'm not really making a decision. It's like doing nothing is like making no decision. I want to clarify doing nothing is an active decision.
Right.
And second thing I want to clarify is doing nothing is sometimes more risky than doing the wrong thing and recovering from it and
Right.
learning from it. So I think a huge learning to me and advice from my standpoint is that, right now, get your head around what is AI, understand the parameters of AI and how it's going to impact your business, build a tentative plan, even if it's going to fail, you might find you have to change it or evolve it over time. Doing nothing should not be the option on the table.
I like that. Um, One of the things I really would love to get to and talk to you about, I'm a big sports guy, so I really enjoyed your 5 T's of coaching video series. And you talked about just iconic sports coaches like Phil Jackson and Bobby Cox. And are there any coaches that you either studied or spoke to who you think would be really good at transitioning to the business world from the sports world?
Thank you for paying attention to that video series. It was one among the most fun projects I ever did.
I'm
It was
jealous.
really, I was an athlete in high school and college and loved sports and still do. My kids play varsity sports. Um, you know, uh, I wrote two cases on Pete Carroll from the Seahawks, and both coincidentally have retired this last year. And the one thing I learned from Pete Carroll, actually, he was asking me, he said, "What do you study, Ranjay?" So I have my elevator pitch answer. So I said, I think it's cute. I said, "Oh, I study how to unlock organizational potential." I figured 3 words: unlock organizational potential. Why?
Right.
Isn't that fast?
Succinct and to the point.
What do you study? He said, "I study how to unlock human potential." I'm like, darn it. I love his answer better than mine. And he said, "My job is to take highly motivated, highly performing professional athletes who are at the top of their game, and they know it, right? They broke through, they got into the NFL, they're playing for a top team, they're starting position. I mean, they've done it all. They've paid their dues, they work out, they're disciplined, they're focused, they're doing, and they believe they're at the top of their game, and they have highly incentive to be at the top of the game, right? So there's huge upside for being absolutely the top of your game, right? Patrick Mahomes versus other quarterbacks, or Travis Kelsey versus anybody else. So and he said, my job as a coach to take some of these players and make them even better than they think they are able to be. And I'm like, how do you do that? He said, that's the job of a coach. And I wrote, and as I was talking to him, he said, listen, what you need to understand is I'm a kind of an aberrant in the NFL. There are other models of coaching as well. So he introduced me to Bill Belichick, who also retired now. Belichick's model of coaching very different than Pete Carroll's.
Yep.
And then you discover there's a labor market, there's a self-selection. Some
Hmm.
players want to play for Pete, other players want to play for Bill Belichick.
Right.
And I found the same in college football. So I wrote a case on Nick Saban. And so you discover that leaders' jobs, fundamentally, yes, you need to be a strategist, you need to get the organization in place. Yes, you got to make a bunch of decisions also. But one of the key job of leader is to unlock human potential, because we create an organization are the context within which work gets done. And how people show up is a function of what kind of context you create for them.
Right. And is there anything in particular that you think sports coaches do really, really well? I mean, aside from what you just spoke about, that business leaders could take a cue from that. One of the things I think about is business leaders all have to adjust their strategy, but sports teams are adjusting their strategy minute by minute by minute. Is there, obviously the pace is different, but is there something from that business leaders can kind of take to heart with their own strategy adjustments?
So let's think about this. I can't imagine a sports coach retiring and going and becoming CEO. Even a Coach K or a Bobby Knight once upon a time, or or Belichick and Pete Carroll or Nick Saban or any of these coaches who retired. But they have a really good gig going about going and speaking to companies about leadership. And now the
Right.
question you ask is, why are these organizations and their teams really keen to hear from these? Why do they want to hear Coach K? Coach K is a really popular speaker in the business circuit. Or people from the Navy SEALs or other things like that. So you're like, what exactly do they do? And I think is the realization most leaders have is that organizations work best when their people are working their best.
Hmm.
How do you get people to show up differently? Right? How do you get them to perform at a level that they don't even know they can perform? How do you unlock their potential? And there's a lot we can learn because it is not just like I got a big stick and practice, 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 show up, show up, show up. There's that model of leadership as well, by the way, which is a very top-down, directive, autocratic, disciplinarian, managed by fear. Right? It works. There are some leaders like that, and some coaches like that too. There are others who manage it differently. Right? Pete Carroll, for instance, his model is by managing by caring.
Hmm.
And by caring, he's trying to get them to buy into something different, that you're not just playing for yourself, you're playing for each other, you're playing for the team, you're playing for me as the coach, and you're playing for the community.
Right.
And the idea is when you feel that sense of commitment and responsibility, your motivation is going to go up beyond I'm playing for myself and my annual bonus. And if I play well and I get good stats, I'll get traded for a higher salary.
Right.
That also motivates. That also motivates. And different people want different things. So, depending on what kind of players you want. So I think there's so much we can learn. I'll give you one more that I learned from actually Sir Alex Ferguson, the former coach of Manchester United, the soccer
Hmm.
team in the UK. And he said one of the hardest things for a winning team is to come back and want to win again. Because not that they're complacent and lazy and say, oh, I've been there, done that. It's because they're so scared of losing. They don't
Makes
try to
sense.
win. So you see, there's so much we can learn about risk aversion and caution and adversity management, all that stuff that happens.
It's a very cool project. I'm jealous that you got to do that. And I do want to say that people can see that series on your speaker page at the sternstrategy.com website.
I'm
Ranjay,
sorry.
do you believe that? Because I was also an athlete in growing up and in high school, and a lot of times people would say you're only as good as your last game. Whether you won or you lost, you're only as good as your last game. Do you believe that?
So I used to have a hairdresser. He passed away, unfortunately, at age 90. And he used to always say, as a hairdresser, you're only as good as your last haircut.
Mm.
You can cut somebody's hair for 30 years, you give them one bad haircut, they never come back. And so I get that. But I think there's a larger point you're making, which is about sustaining. How do we sustain our motivation, our energy, our drive, our commitment, our purpose? Finding it in a magical moment at an offsite. Like I always worry, like when I teach or I do workshops in companies, I always worry that, okay, they heard Gulati, they're feeling good about themselves for about 10 minutes, and then they're off to the coffee break and like, who was that guy?
Right.
So how do you create sticky messages?
Right.
How do you create this idea that here is a thought or an ideal or a distinction that I hope you will hold on to and you will use? That's the dream of every teacher, I think, is that we want to have lasting impact on our students. And that's not easy. It's really, really hard work. And I think you're right. Then, you start to say, okay, how do I make messages stick? But I think the larger question to you is that, like, how do I sustain my momentum or my possibility over time? And you gotta really think hard about that. That is one of the biggest, toughest issues. How do you kind of stay energized and focused? I mean, we can get inspired and energized for a few minutes here, there, for a few days here, there. Like, how do I kind of really fill my soul that I can maintain that momentum?
All right. As we're getting close to the end of our time here, we like to jump into a lightning round. So these are
Oh,
questions we did not prep you on. So we want your gut reaction. Okay. Besides your own, what is your favorite podcast?
I loved Masters of Scale. I wanted to study how organizations grow and change. And to me, that was a very powerful one.
Okay. And we do want to get a plug in for your podcast, Deep Purpose. Okay. So next question: in an alternate universe, what would you be doing for a living?
I love what I do, I have to tell you. I mean, it is the most meaningful thing I've done in my life. Um, I feel like my mother's wish came true, or in wanting me to do something that didn't feel like work. So I feel very blessed in that regard. But I would always want to define my own self in terms of impact. And I think
Mhm.
is, one thing I saw in her, I saw what she as an entrepreneur was able to do. She was able to uplift communities,
Yep.
she was able to uplift employees, she was able to uplift customers, and she was able to uplift herself. So if I really had to do something else, I would really be an entrepreneur with the eye on having impact, which was also financially sustainable.
Yep.
This is not me trying to say, let me build a foundation and go looking for grant money. I feel that blending financial success into a social impact project, I think the world needs more examples of that to believe it's possible.
Yep. That's amazing. I just wanted to be an astronaut. I don't have anything that lofty.
I like
Okay.
yours.
So the most important question, okay? Imagine you're halfway to work already. What is the one thing that would make you turn around and go back if you forgot it?
Well, for starters, my wallet.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I might even be looking for my phone. These days, you become so addicted to these
Yep.
devices.
Yep.
Um, but you know what else? I actually carry now with me a diary.
Ooh, I
And
like
my
it.
diary is my record keeper of any new ideas I hear every day. And it's been a real liberator because it allowed me to really explore possibility. Like, what are some new ways of thinking of things?
Hmm.
And this is so I if I left my diary, I'd probably go back because I won't have a place to record what I learned that day.
I love that. I was telling Whitney when we were writing these questions that I figured most people say their phone, but I had a feeling that we were gonna get some really really good stuff, and that is I love that. That's great.
That's perfect.
Wow, you guys asked some great questions.
Thank you.
You are not messing around at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
So here's an easy one. If people want to learn more about your work, of course, they can find your profile on sternstrategy.com. Where else are you? Social media?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm very active. I have a newsletter on LinkedIn. They're welcome to subscribe if they want. I have I have two websites where one is deeppurpose.net, where my podcast lives, and also a bunch of resource material, and then also ranjaygulati.com. So I have two locations on there, and LinkedIn is I don't barrage. I would do like a once a week or twice a week postings with something that I think is meaningful. But it's been really a pleasure. Thank you so very much. I mean, you guys did your
Thank
homework
you.
and you asked outstanding questions.
Thank you. And we really appreciate your time. I know how busy you are. So I appreciate you taking a little bit of time to chat with us.
Thank you. Really a pleasure.
It's been great.